Today, Japan is a much admired and respected superpower around the world. Japan is an archipelago in the Far East. It is today the third largest economy in the world, behind only the United States and China. An incredible and admirable country both economically and culturally. But it wasn't always like that. 100 years ago, Japan was a poor country and closed to the world. In addition to the poverty of the country, he still got into a lot of fights. This caused Japan to end up in ruins after World War II. With devastated infrastructure, lack of natural resources, and a dismal past, it seemed that Japan would be just another failed state with no hope of recovering before the world, both economically and morally. But despite all this, Japan managed to become one of the greatest powers in the world and managed to temporarily pass the United States GDP in the 90s. And to complement, Japan became one of the countries with the lowest homicide rate in the world and very peaceful. So the big question is, how did Japan get so rich in such a short time? Is everything perfect there? Does the country face some kind of huge economic problem? This and much more we will see now. Japan is approximately 337.2 square kilometers and is larger than it appears to be. Its population is approximately 126 million. However, Japan has also shown a population decline in recent years, 2 million less than in 2010. This is due to factors of vital importance such as its economic stagnation. But before we get into those details about its stagnation, let's talk about its rise and how it became so important worldwide in such a short time. Japan went through a process known as the economic miracle. At the beginning of the 20th century, Japan was far behind the rest of the world due to its long history of feudalism and a very closed and restricted regime. To get around this, Japan entered with a strong regime of militarism and rapid industrialization of the state. This ended up creating an extensive Japanese empire involving countries like Taiwan, Korea, and others. The Japanese considered imperialism fundamental to the nation's economy and politics. The country, having few natural and mineral resources, was afraid that other foreign countries would destroy its economy by blocking its access to sea routes and masterpieces. This aggressiveness of Japan ended up pushing Japan to the Second World War in 1941. The end of the story you probably know. Japan ended up being the last country to surrender, and the only country to receive the attack of 2 atomic bombs. The war ended many of the economic gains that Japan had made since 1968. In addition to losing all of its colonies that Japan had possession of. And to make Japan's situation worse, about 80% of its industries were completely destroyed. But history has taught Japan well, and with all this happening, Japan realized that to become a mega power it would have to take a totally different path. Getting help from an old enemy, that was the United States. The United States reached out to Japan and helped in various ways, such as making loans to rebuild the country. This with the intention of helping to avoid militarization and communism in the country again, in addition to democratizing it. The consequence of this help was an excellent and essential one for a war that ended so recently. Large and complete investments were made in the country, such as coal, electricity, chemicals, and steel. In addition, they had the great help of millions of ex-soldiers to make a highly effective and disciplined workforce. By the mid-1950s, output in the economy as a whole had reached pre-war levels. With the other sectors of the country's economy highly structured and consolidated, Japan can focus on other sectors of the country's economy and growth, such as education. In a short time, Japan had one of the highest literacy rates in the world. Japanese discipline and the country's high standards of education have contributed to Japan having a highly advanced technological evolution. Years go by, and in the mid-70s the country already had the highest GDP in the world, second only to the Soviet Union and the United States. An extremely high and effective education, an economy in rapid and constant technological innovation of high productivity, and a good political stability were the key basis for the excellent and incredible growth of Japan. The Japanese infrastructure, ports, highways, power generation, etc., is also highly developed, a factor that contributes greatly to the country's economic development. The Japanese population has a high consumption power, as the wages paid by Japanese companies are high. Therefore, the Japanese domestic market is very developed, although exports are also high. However, just like any country in the world, however developed it may be, it has problems and challenges. Once again, the country needs to reinvent itself. The land of the rising sun still suffers from past problems from a well-known time in the mid-1990s known as the Lost Decade. That part of Japan's history that causes problems to this day is due to the housing bubble that burst, causing the stock market to crash. This took Japan about 12 years to recover to the same GDP as 1995. This has led to many companies hiring Japanese workers on a temporary basis. And unfortunately, wages have so far stagnated, falling by around 13% in the country, an unprecedented percentage in developed countries. Japan's external debts grow at very high levels in relation to the country's GDP, a debt that exceeds 230% in relation to GDP. Since 10 years ago it was only 150%. There is a very important factor that is accelerating the decline of Japan's economy in an extremely worrying way, and that is the fact that other East Asian countries are ahead of Japan economically and technologically very quickly, especially South Korea. Japanese products remain high quality, but the yen's appreciation is complicated compared to competition from rivals offering better prices or more innovation. This is accelerating the decline of Japan's economy again. If today's Japan were a person, it would be an upper middle class guy who earns his $250,000 a year there, but who owes more than $500,000 and spends almost everything he earns to maintain his comfortable and peaceful lifestyle. So the debt only increases and is being pushed with the belly, and this person is already getting old and no longer has the innovative ideas that he had before. But even though Japan is a country that has problems with being in debt and stagnant, it is a rich country and should be used as examples in several positive ways. One of them is that Japan is one of the most peaceful countries in the world according to the Global Peace Index. It is easy to say that countries like Portugal, New Zealand and Iceland are peaceful countries. After all, these countries are in very friendly neighborhoods. Japan has Russia's neighbors China and North Korea. Now imagine how much Japan would have to be militarily arming if not for the direct and indirect protection of its former enemy, the United States. Yes, it is clear that Japan maintains a small military force solely for self-defense. However, due to recent changes in world geopolitics, including tensions with North Korea, Japan finds itself increasingly forced to invest in its armed forces domestically. Japan is an extremely peaceful and safe country. The country has the lowest homicide rate of any other country in the world. An incredible and beautiful example of a peaceful and incredible country. But now, what will the future of Japan's economy look like? Since the mid-80s and 90s, Japan has surprised the world with incredible technologies that revolutionized the market. Companies like Sony, Toshiba, Nintendo, and Honda are one of the few examples that show the greatness of Japan's economy and technological market. The entrepreneurial mindset that is no longer the same in Japan, at least when we compare it with Israel or even Estonia, which are ahead of Japan in terms of innovation. After the destruction of the Second World War, there were no jobs, and the hard times created a warrior nation that rebuilt the country and made it one of the most prosperous in the world. Already in times of prosperity comfort, there was a change of priority in the life of the Japanese. Going to college, getting excellent grades, and getting a job in a mega company has become the life mission of many, and probably the single biggest goal for the vast majority of Japanese people. This is a valid path for a percentage of the population, but when this is the mindset of the vast majority, the culture ends up being reflected in the stagnant economy of the country. But Japan has already faced and won much bigger challenges, and it won and turned around. And surely you can do the same and surprise the world again. Did you like the video? So leave your like to continue receiving our daily videos. And so you don't just stick with this video. I'll leave 2 more recommended videos for you to learn more about the business world. One about the future of Russia's economy after the war sanctions, and another video about why China builds ghost buildings. Thank you so much for watching this far. A big hug and see you in the next videos.